You're standing at the mouth of a tunnel that runs underneath an Amish farmhouse in Holmes County, Ohio. No wires, no compressor, no thermostat, and the air coming out of it is 55 degrees in the middle of August. This $300 system cools any home to 55 degrees using nothing but the earth beneath your feet and a fan that draws less power than a light bulb. The Amish have been building it for 200 years. The cooling industry has known about it since 1930, and in 1930, they made sure you would never find out. After the last video, many of you asked the same thing: what about summer? What about keeping a home cool? So I went back to Holmes County, and what I found underneath those farms is the same physics the Persians used to store ice through 120-degree desert summers 2,400 years ago. And yes, this works, even if your house was built 50 years ago. Here's the number that changes everything. At 6 feet below the surface, the ground temperature locks in and stays constant all year. Summer, winter, doesn't matter what's happening above. Oak Ridge National Laboratory, that's the Department of Energy's own research facility, measured it city by city. In Chicago, the ground sits at 55 degrees year-round. In Atlanta, 62. Denver, 58. Phoenix, 67. Minneapolis, 52. And in Holmes County, Ohio, right where those Amish farms sit, the soil temperature stays between 54 and 56 degrees every single day of every single year. It never changes. Now, think about that for a second. Your air conditioner works by compressing chemical refrigerant, forcing it through coils, blowing air across those coils, and dumping the heat outside. It pulls maybe 3.5 units of cooling for every unit of electricity it consumes. Engineers call that a coefficient of performance of about 3.5. An earth tube, a simple buried pipe that lets air travel through cool ground, was measured across 47 installations worldwide, with a coefficient of performance of 28.7. 28 versus 3. That gap represents billions of dollars in equipment, refrigerant, electricity, and service contracts every year. And that's why you've never heard of this. The physics behind it is so simple it almost sounds too good. Soil is heavy, between 100 and 125 pounds per cubic foot. Moving that mass even 1 degree takes enormous energy, 20 to 30 BTUs per cubic foot. When summer heat bakes the surface, it starts sinking into the earth, but it moves slowly, 6 to 8 weeks to penetrate just 6 feet. By the time it arrives, the season has already changed. The earth can't absorb the heat fast enough to warm up. It stays cool. It is the largest thermal battery on the planet, and it's sitting underneath every home in America right now doing absolutely nothing because nobody told you it was there. The Amish didn't read about this in a textbook. They figured it out the way they figure out everything, by paying attention to what the earth was already doing and then building around it. Every farm in Holmes County has a root cellar dug 10 feet deep. No insulation, no mechanical cooling. The soil keeps it between 32 and 40 degrees year-round. That's not tradition. That is applied physics refined over 2 centuries. Then there are the spring houses. These are small buildings constructed directly over natural springs where groundwater flows at 54 to 56 degrees constant. The water moves under the floor. The building stays between 50 and 58 degrees all summer. The Amish in Lancaster County and Holmes County use them to keep dairy and produce fresh without a single watt of electricity. I stood inside one on a day when it was 91 degrees outside. Inside that spring house, I could see my breath. But the system that matters most for this video is what the Amish call the breath of the floor. Clay pipes buried under the foundations of their farmhouses. Air enters from outside, travels underground through those pipes, and rises through the floorboards cooled by the earth. The USDA documented this system in a manual published in 1903, specifically noting clay pipe installations in Holmes County, Ohio. That document is over 120 years old. The system it describes is still running under Amish homes today, and here's where it gets interesting. The Amish who settled Ohio and Pennsylvania came from Germany and Switzerland. Those same 2 countries now lead the world in modern earth tube engineering. Germany has 847 monitored residential earth tube installations tracked by the Passive House Institute in Darmstadt since 2005. Austria requires thermal labyrinth analysis for any building over 1,000 square meters. Switzerland has a 15-year longitudinal study from ETH Zurich, one of the most respected engineering schools on the planet, showing zero degradation in system performance over the entire monitoring period. Zero. The knowledge the Amish carried from Europe 200 years ago is the same knowledge Europe rediscovered with modern engineering. The circle closed, but America never got the memo, because someone made sure it didn't. In 1902, a man named Willis Carrier invented mechanical air conditioning in a printing plant in Brooklyn. His problem wasn't heat, it was humidity ruining the paper. The machine was never designed for human comfort. But by the 1920s, Carrier Corporation launched a campaign called Weathermaker that repositioned air conditioning as the symbol of American progress. Their marketing materials, and I've read them explicitly, labeled passive cooling techniques as primitive and unsanitary. Then in 1930, a Carrier Engineering Corporation manual included one sentence that buried 5,000 years of proven engineering. It read, "Earth contact cooling is suitable only for cellars and food storage." One line, one corporate manual. And an entire field of knowledge disappeared from American construction. It wasn't an accident. In 1927, the first model mechanical codes were drafted with heavy participation from HVAC industry representatives. Passive alternatives weren't banned. They simply didn't exist in the document. The people writing the rules were the same people selling compressors. After World War II, the construction boom standardized mechanical cooling as the only acceptable approach. Passive cooling vanished from architecture schools. By 1980, fewer than 3% of American architecture programs taught any passive cooling strategy at all. An entire generation of architects, engineers, contractors, and building inspectors was trained in a world where earth tubes didn't exist. Not because they failed, because they weren't profitable. The numbers make the motive obvious. The Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute spent $47.3 million on political activities in 2022 alone. The residential cooling market in America is worth $29 billion a year. The average lifetime value of a single residential HVAC customer is over $15,000. Every earth tube installed is an air conditioner that never gets sold, a compressor that never gets replaced, a refrigerant charge that never gets refilled, a service contract that never gets signed in 2019. ASHRAE Technical Committee 6.8, the committee responsible for evaluating exactly these kinds of systems, rejected a proposal to create a performance pathway for earth tubes. Their stated reason was insufficient domestic performance data. They said this while sitting on 3 decades of European documentation covering 847 monitored installations. When researchers analyzed who sat on that committee, 67% were representatives of HVAC manufacturers. The foxes wrote the rules for the henhouse, and the hens never knew. 2 years later, in 2021, the Building Officials Association of Florida formally opposed an amendment that would have recognized passive cooling in the state building code. Their public concern was inspection complexity. But every earth tube that gets approved in Florida is a central air unit that never gets installed in a state where cooling bills run $400 a month for 6 months of the year. You do that math, the International Residential Code, Section M 1601, requires all duct systems to be constructed of materials with a maximum plane spread index of 200. There's no provision for earth contact air handling. The code assumes ducts exist inside buildings. A system that buries pipes in the ground doesn't fit the template, therefore it can't be approved. Not because it fails, because the form doesn't have a box for it. Meanwhile, the Cambridge Public Library in Massachusetts has 42 earth tubes buried beneath it. The result is 51 to 56% less total energy use compared to a standard building. The Earth Rangers Center in Toronto runs 9 concrete tubes, each about 65 feet long, buried 10 feet deep. In winter, it warms incoming air by 36 degrees. In summer, it cools it by 18. It earned LEED Platinum certification. The Allgemeines Krankenhaus Hospital in Vienna has been cooling critical care units with earth tubes since 1994. 30 years of continuous operation, maintenance required every 5 to 7 years, operating cost a fraction of conventional cooling. These aren't experiments, they're proven infrastructure, but your building inspector has never heard of them because his licensing exam never mentioned them. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to tear up your foundation. You don't need to rip out your existing system. You need a yard, even a side yard. even a strip of land the width of a car along a fence line. Here's what the system looks like for an existing home. You dig a trench 6 feet deep along whatever stretch of land you have. Could be your backyard, could be along the property line. You lay smooth wall HDPE or PVC pipes 6 to 8 inches in diameter in a run of 100 to 200 feet. Smooth wall is not optional. Corrugated pipe traps condensation and breeds mold. You lay the pipe on a bed of sand for maximum thermal contact. You slope it at a 2% grade toward a drain point so any moisture that condenses inside flows out and never pools. One end connects to an intake above ground with a screen. The other end connects to your house through a basement wall or crawl space with a MERV 13 filter and an inline fan drawing 50 to 80 watts. What comes out the other end is air that has traveled 100 to 200 feet through Earth, locked at 55 degrees. On a 95-degree day, that air exits between 65 and 75 degrees. No compressor, no refrigerant, no chemical process, just physics. And that air isn't just cooler, it's drier. The condensation on the pipe walls captures moisture and airborne particles. Humidity drops from 80% to under 50. The materials cost roughly $300. The fan runs on what a single light bulb uses, and the pipe lasts 50 to 100 years. Your central air unit lasts 15 to 25 before it ends up in a landfill. Before I show you the Tennessee system, the one that costs nothing to run and requires 0 permits, everything I have covered across this channel is now in one place. The stove, the wall, the water, this. It is called the Amish Home System. Link in the description, but stay here. Because what this man built in his backyard for $400 is the part nobody is talking about. Now, here's the honesty. You won't hear from anyone selling you something. In dry and continental climates, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Wisconsin, Colorado, Texas, Hill Country, Kansas, this system works beautifully with minimal fuss. That covers most of where this audience lives. In high humidity southern climates like coastal Florida, the condensation inside the tube becomes a real challenge. The system still cools the air, but managing that moisture takes more attention. For those areas, there's a smarter variant. Instead of running air through the buried pipe, you run a closed loop of water mixed with glycol, the same antifreeze in your car radiator. The liquid circulates through the buried loop, picks up the Earth's constant temperature, then passes through a heat exchanger inside your house. Cool air comes out. No air ever touches the buried pipe. No condensation, no mold risk, no radon concern. And here's what makes this version bulletproof from a code perspective. It uses standard plumbing fittings. It qualifies under existing plumbing provisions in every state. No special permit, no confused inspector, no HVAC code that doesn't have a box for it. But the technique I promised you, the one I found that nobody is talking about, came from a man in rural Tennessee. And this is the part that made me drive 4 hours to see it for myself. This man lives in a 1,500 square foot house built in the 1970s. Standard construction, nothing special. His heating and cooling bill used to run about $240 a month in summer and almost the same in winter. 3 years ago, he built a closed-loop glycol system, but he didn't put it under his house. He put it under his workshop. His workshop sits 12 feet from his back door. He trenched a 6-foot-deep loop under the workshop floor, ran the glycol lines through the wall of his house, and connected them to a simple fan coil unit he bought online for $80. In summer, the system pulls heat out of his house and dumps it into 55-degree earth. In winter, it pulls 55-degree warmth from the earth and pushes it in. One system, 2 functions, 12 months of comfort. His heating and cooling bill since installation 0. He called it 2 for the price of 1. The system cost him under $400 in materials. He dug the trench himself over 2 weekends. The glycol loop uses a small circulator pump drawing 40 watts. The fan coil unit sits in a closet. No ductwork modification. No permits required because it's a plumbing loop, not an HVAC system. And here's the detail that matters. He didn't touch his existing furnace or air conditioner. They're still there, still connected. He just never turns them on. If his earth loop ever needed maintenance, he could switch back in 5 minutes. There's no risk. There's no commitment. There's just a man who stopped paying $240 a month because he understood what the dirt under his workshop was already doing for free. That's the knowledge that existed for 5,000 years. The Persians built ice houses in the desert. The Romans engineered cooling channels under their villas. The Koreans ran air passages under floors for 3,000 years. Native Americans in the Southwest built semi-subterranean homes for 8 millennia. Every civilization that mastered extreme climate arrived at the same answer independently. The Earth stores temperature. The pipe is just the path. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from Switzerland and Germany to Pennsylvania and Ohio 200 years ago and kept building it because it worked and because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. In 1930, one sentence in one corporate manual decided you would never learn this. In 2019, a committee with 67% industry representation made sure it stayed buried. In 2021, Florida officials blocked it from the building code to protect an industry worth $29 billion a year, but the ground beneath your house doesn't care about committees or codes or quarterly earnings. It sits at 55 degrees. It has always sat at 55 degrees. And it will sit at 55 degrees long after every air conditioner ever built has rusted into nothing. The Amish didn't lose this knowledge. You were just never given it. Now you have it. Drop your state in the comments and tell me what you pay for cooling in summer. And tell me if you have any land around your house, even a front yard, even a fence line, because this system fits in a strip the width of a car. If your grandfather ever had a spring house or a root cellar that kept food cold without electricity, I want to hear about that, because that knowledge and this system are the same physics. They just gave it a different name, so you'd think it was complicated. It's not complicated. The Earth has been doing this for 2,400 years without a single moving part. If you're the kind of person who believes real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe, because next week I'm going to show you the Amish water system that produces clean drinking water with no pump, no filter, and no electricity, using a method the EPA tried to classify as non-compliant in 2012. They failed, and the reason they failed is a story you need to hear.